Hi guys, I want to talk to you about something that, interestingly, I researched online and could find very, very little about, and that is internal versus external accountability. So we know a lot about external accountability. We say to someone, hey, will you be my gym partner? Will you, help me out? Will you be my mentor? Will you help me to have someone to check in every week with, a project I'm doing or progress I'm trying to make or like whatever, right? The problem and where external accountability falls down is what if that person who's holding you accountable moves, maybe changes jobs, forgets to give you that call, right? So there's all these different ways where you don't have control over that other person. And if there's one thing I've learned in my life, that is simply that the more that I can control means the greater chance I will have of being successful. So I didn't do well in corporate Canada because I couldn't control my promotions, my progression in the organization. I couldn't control whether someone thought my idea was good or absolute shite, right? And so because I couldn't work in that environment anymore, I started my own business. I used to, a long time ago, I did a lot of work for the Toronto Real Estate Board. I still do, but I depended on a system that they had to make sure that I got teaching gigs. Now that system collapsed of its own volition, but because I didn't control that, my business suffered and I nearly went bankrupt. So those two experiences really taught me some very hard-won lessons that if we are to be successful, we must control literally everything. And that includes keeping ourselves accountable for the work that we're doing, for the progress that we're making, and for whether or not we're achieving our goals. So when you think about it, there's two different kinds of motivation, like I said. So there's internal and there is external, right? So external, these are maybe, it could be a coach, right? So a lot of people, there's two different kinds of coaches. There's accountability coaching, which is people you check in with. They're not really teaching you, that's not their mandate, but they're giving you an opportunity to check in, okay? So it's kind of like a check-in coach. The kind of coaching I do for high performance has a little bit of the external motivation with it, but what I really try to push people to get is the internal motivation, because at some point our coaching sessions are going to end. So then what happens? If they're no longer depending on me to hold them accountable every single week, then all of the progress we've made during that coaching time, whether it's 3 months or 3 years, is completely wasted. So their ROI is actually negative because they would have spent money with me and then not gotten anything out of it, right? So external coaches, you're depending on other people. There is no control, okay? And what usually happens is the people who are in here, if their coach doesn't show up one day, they're like, oh, well, I didn't succeed because they didn't show up. They didn't help me out. They did this, they did that, and they do the blame game. They're pointing their fingers at everybody. And this is a funny thing my mom taught me. She said, when you point a finger, there's 3 fingers pointing right back at you. So, there's 3 times more reason to look at yourself as to why you didn't succeed versus trying to blame somebody else and try to put it off into some external factor that is a cause for whether you succeeded or whether you failed. So the question becomes, how do we develop internal accountability? This one is tricky. So the little research that I did online today, just kind of checking around to see, what's out there? What are there research papers? Are there blogs and articles? And I found ground zero on what it takes to develop self-accountability or internal accountability. People talk about, take responsibility for yourself and, all these kinds of things, but if you maybe are filled with doubt or fear or you're not too sure where you're going, having internal accountability is really hard. And if you're going to be consistent with what you need to do to be successful, you have to find a way of saying within yourself, how do I hold myself accountable? How do I make sure that this girl does exactly what she's supposed to do? So here's one question that you can ask yourself. Okay, so I'm just going to erase, where'd my eraser go? There it is. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that you can put in here for what does it mean to create that internal accountability. And the first one is, what are you fighting for? Okay, so what are you waking up in the morning and going, you know what? This thing that I want to do, it's so important to me. it's worth fighting for. And when you have something worth fighting for, then you develop the energy and you develop the purpose to propel you to constantly be working on that particular thing. Now, here's the rub. Sometimes people really feel bad about themselves. There are so many people in my coaching program and that I meet, day to day, and they really don't feel like they're good enough. Everything comes down to them feeling, they're somehow lacking. They didn't live up to other people's expectations. They didn't live up to their own expectations, or some sort of made up goal that they said, well, if I don't get that, well, then I'm not successful. Okay. So sometimes they find it hard for themselves to fight for themselves. So not all of us feel that way, or sometimes we can get past that. It takes a lot of work. You can fight for yourself, or here's something else. Fight for others. Fight for your family who you want to role model the best behaviors for. Fight for your colleagues who you want to encourage. Fight for, your clients who you want to see live a better life or have better success at work or whatever. Whatever it is that you're offering, service or product, right? Find someone else that's worth fighting for and say, you know what? I might not be able to look inside myself and feel good enough about myself to say I'm worth fighting for. But dollars to donuts, you will find someone else that is absolutely worth fighting for. Okay, so that's one thing. So how do you find internal motivation? You find a cause worth fighting for. The next thing that you should do is identify your purpose. Now, this is where, again, people get all screwed up with defining your purpose, because they look at it as like the meaning of life. What is my purpose in life? And then they go, and then they fall off, and then they don't do anything because that is way too big. So your purpose needs to be broken down into something very, very simple, right? Like, what are the outcomes that you're trying to achieve for those who depend on you? And again, your purpose can be for your family, it could be for your clients, it could be for your colleagues, it could be for your community. So think about the outcome. So if you could, here's a great way of figuring out kind of what your purpose is. I've got some videos on creating your purpose statement. So if you go to my video page on my website, RebeccaMountain.ca, you'll find a lot of that there. But also on my Facebook page. In terms of this, the questions you need to ask yourself are related to, what if your best year happened? Okay, so Dean Graziosi, I first heard from him. It's called My Best Year. Well, you can still see that, yeah. So my best year. So what I want you to do is I want you to outline for yourself, grab a piece of paper and say, what if everything in the next year happened perfectly? What would your life be like? Like, really, like, you wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you have a wonderful breakfast with your spouse, you kiss your children, they are nice to you, right? And then you go throughout your day. What kind of an environment do you live in? It's not about things, okay? So be very specific. My best year has grand zero to do with what things you have. Now, you might have an income goal that you have for there, but I really encourage you, when you're setting down your best year and what your life is going to be like, avoid putting in things that you have because you've had your best year. Okay, unless it's things about security, like, a roof over your head, more, consistent food on the table. Like, those are the basic necessities of life. If those are your best year elements, then those are absolutely fine. What I'm talking about is like, I have a Rolls Royce, or I'm covered in gold chains. Okay, not your best year. Your best year is, what is your life like? And here's why this is important for internal accountability and motivation. If you know what you want as your outcome 1 year from there, and you align it with a purpose, and you understand what you're fighting for, then it's just logistics. Then it's just, what aligned actions do you need to take to get you from where you are now to where you need to get to. And the only thing that's left that you need to add to your arsenal to make sure that this happens is consistency. And that consistency, most people rely on other people, external accountability partners, external motivations. But when those are removed, or when you're no longer seeking those out, it all collapses in on itself. However, if you have internal accountability, it will never collapse on you. You will always achieve what you want as long as you know what you're fighting for, which will give you a purpose. You know exactly what you want your life to be like. And the last piece again is then to take action. It's always the last piece of the puzzle, and it's usually the piece people forget. So don't forget that action piece, but you will remain active. You will do the things you want to do because there's a reason for you to do it. There's a purpose you're fighting for, and it's important to you. So if you're finding that you're not accomplishing what you want to in life or in business, if you're finding that you blame others for why you're not successful, or you lean on others to have check-ins with you to make sure you stay successful, it's not that those things are bad. They're great. They're add-ons. But it will never work for you until you have it within yourself. So I hope you guys have found this really helpful. Please do go ahead and check out other blogs and other stuff that I've got on my website or on my Facebook page. I really try to share as much of this as possible. Nearly everyone who comes to me for help is struggling with internal motivation and internal accountability, which is why I wanted to share it with you guys today. I hope you guys have a fantastic afternoon wherever you are in the world. Enjoy your weekend, and share this video if you found it helpful, because someone out there, and you might not know who they are, because people don't often really promote or project that they're lacking internal motivation. A lot of shame around that. People thinking, well, I should be able to do this myself. No shame in asking for help, and certainly no shame in sharing this if you think it would help somebody else. Have a great day, guys, and I'll see you soon.